Hi gang, this is section 4.2, probably part 1. I don't think I'll put both of them together. So what we're going to learn in 4.2 is just a continuation of 4.1. So I'm not going to show you anything new. Matter of fact, I'm going to go back and show you. This is what I showed in the Zoom lecture on Wednesday night. But the furniture problem, here's where the criteria comes from and your maximum. So again, you have your 6.3, 1.126, 6.3, 1.126. So it's all right here. Negative 80, negative 70 comes down here. You always take the opposites, put them down here. Then you have that identity, and then your constants, 96, 18, 72. Once you get to here, you got to find the biggest negative, which is negative 80, which gives you your pivot column. Once you have the pivot column, you're going to find your ratio. So you get 96 on the right and 6 on the left. So 96 divided by, should be 6, and that should be 16. Yep. 18 divided by 1 is 18, and 72 divided by 2 is 36. So we got to get a 1 here. There's your pivot row, pivot column where they intersect. That's the 6. We got to change the 6 to a 1. That becomes our pivot. So we take 1/6 of row 1, and we get, I got my circle in the wrong place. Should be right there. Once we get the 1, then we want to get zeros. So we go through these and come up with our new matrix here. So you got your 1 and zeros. Then you go to the second column. Biggest negative is negative 30. My box has slid down a little bit. I changed some things and my shapes didn't go with them. But looking, here's your column. So you're going to take 16 divided by half is 32. 2 divided by a half is 4. 40 divided by 5 is 8. The smallest though, you want smallest positive, which is 4. So the 1/2, where the pivot row and pivot column intersects 1/2, I got to change that to a 1. So I'm going to take 2 times row 2. Okay, now that you got the 1, you want to get zeros. So I perform the operations. You can see the first column, second column. The big thing is there's no negatives on the bottom. That tells us we're done. Your maximum is always going to be lower right. And then to find the points, here's your X column. So the 1's here, that corresponds with 14. And the Y column, the 1 is here, so that corresponds with the 4. So 14, 4. So your maximum profit is $1,400. That happens when you produce 14 sofas and 4 chairs. Okay, so that was a review. I've already done that a couple times with you. So let's go to this one. I'm using a different pen. The other one gets a little big, takes up too much room. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 from those. And then from the profit function, I see 10 and 1. So I'm going to make that negative 10, positive 1. Then we've got our identity. And then at the end, I've got the 10 and the 6, and the bottom one's always a 0. So that's how you set it all up. Now I know when you read the book, they take you through a lot of stuff, and you don't need to know all of that. If you can do what I just did there, then you're in good shape. Okay, so, oh, by the way, that was a negative 1 there. Okay, so along the bottom, we look for the biggest negative. So that's going to be negative 10. So here's my pivot column. Then I'm going to take 10 divided by 1 equals 10. I'm going to take 6 divided by 3, and that's equal to 2, and we don't do anything with the bottom. Smallest positive, we did biggest negative here, smallest positive, that's going to be 2. Now you can see the pivot row. So where the 3 is, that's going to be my pivot. So the top row stays the same. Second row, I got to get a 1 here, so I'm going to take 1/3 of row 2. So 1/3 of 3 is 1. That's going to be my pivot. I'm going to circle it. 1/3 of 4 is 4/3. 1/3 of 0 is 0. 1/3 of 1 is 1/3. 1/3 of 0 is 0. And 1/3 of 6 is 2. Bottom row stays the same. You'll notice one of the things I did on this one is I indented the second column so it's shifted over a little bit to the right. By doing that, it's going to make your matrices easier to follow. We talked about that when we were doing Gaussian. I didn't do it on the previous video lecture because the pen I was using up all the room anyway, so I didn't have the room to indent. Okay, so now what? Well, you got your 1, you need a 0 here. So we're going to take negative row 2 plus row 1. Put our answers here in row 1. So negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Negative 4/3, and that's like 6/3. So negative 4 and 6 would be 2/3. 0 and 1 is 1. Negative 1/3 and 0 is negative 1/3. 0 and 0 is 0. And negative 2 and 10 is 8. Second row stays the same because that's where the pivot was. And then the bottom row. Okay, I got to get a 0 here, so I'm going to multiply by 10 and add. So 10 times row 2 plus row 3. So 10 times 1 is 10 plus negative 10 is 0. 10 times 4/3 is 40/3. This is like negative 3/3. So you got 40 and negative 3 would be 37/3. 10 times 0 is 0 plus 0 is 0. 10 times 1/3 is 10/3 plus 0 is 10/3. 10 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. And 10 times 2 is 20 plus 0 is 20. So at this point, you look at the bottom, and the bottom, there are no negatives. That means you're done. So now you can simply look down here and say, okay, what is my max? My maximum profit is, it's always lower right-hand corner, 20. And that'd be 20 bucks because you measure profit in dollars and cents. Okay, now it's a little tricky. So if you go up here, remember here's your X column, there's your Y column. And the X column, that is a unit column. The only one that you have is here and everything else is zeros. So if you take that 1 and you go over to the right, X is equal to 2. Not 8, but 2. Okay, what about Y? Well, when you look at the Y column, I'm going to circle it. Remember how we talked about a unit column? A unit column has exactly 1 1 and the rest of them zeros. The X column was okay. This is not a unit column. Anytime you do not have a unit column, then that variable is automatically 0. So X is 0, or Y is 0. You could write that as 2 comma 0 if you wanted to. I'm going to repeat that again. Anytime you have a variable and the column is not a unit column, then that variable is automatically 0. Don't try to put any logic to it or anything like that. It's just one of those rules. It always is. Okay. Now, when you look at the problem, I'm going to show you one more thing on this one. We actually were kind of in good shape here because on the original problem, notice how you have two negatives. That means you usually would have to go through two iterations. Remember, an iteration is a cycle. A cycle is having a 1 and the rest zeros. Next cycle, get a 1, the rest zeros. The next cycle, get a 1, the rest zeros. So at first sight, you look at it, you say, well, I'm going to have two iterations. Well, we were lucky. We got through with one, and both negatives dropped out at the same time. So we got through that in one iteration rather than two. Okay. I am going to go ahead and start the next one. We'll just have one lecture here, one video lecture for 4.2. Okay, and these are the same examples that are in the book. Okay, now this one's got three variables, so I want to maximize x plus 2y plus z. And these are called constraints, these inequalities. Notice you got x greater than or equal to 0, y greater than or equal to 0, and in this one you got z greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so let's try setting it up. I'm not going to finish that just yet. So I'm going to have 1, -1, and 2. That's from that one. And the second one I'm going to have 2, 1, and 3. That takes care of my two inequalities. And then from my profit function, I'm going to have -1, -2, -1. You always take the opposite. So I got positive, positive, positive becomes negative, negative, negative. I've noticed this book sometimes will have negatives up here, but realistically, you're never going to have that. Okay, now my identity. So it's 3 by 3, so I'm going to go 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. And then I'm going to put the 10 and the 12, and then the last one's always going to be a 0. So there's the first matrix. Okay, let's find the biggest negative. So if you look at the bottom, the biggest negative is right here. So this is my pivot column. So we come over here, we're going to take 10 divided by -1. And that's going to be -10. Then I got 12 divided by 1, and that's 12. And then we don't look at the bottom one. Okay, now what? Well, we want the smallest positive. So the smallest positive on this one would be right there. Notice we don't look at the -10 because it's negative. It's got to be positive. And we don't look at this one because that's 0. It's got to be the smallest positive. So that would be 12. So that tells us the middle row is our pivot row. Okay, and luckily we've got a 1 here already, so I don't have to do that. See what happens. Okay, we want to get a 0 up here because my pivot is right here. So to get a 0, all I have to do is take row 2 plus row 1. So 2 plus 1 is 3. 1 plus -1 is 0. 3 plus 2 is 5. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. And 10 plus 12 is 22. Second row stays the same because that's where the pivot was. Okay, and then the bottom row, we're going to have to take 2 times row 2, add it to row 3. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus -1 is 3. 4 times 1 is 4. plus negative 2 is 2. 4 times 3 is 12, plus negative 1 is 11. 0 plus 0 is 0. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 0 is 4. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And 4 times 12 is 48, plus 0 is 48. Oh, I got looking at this. It's 2 times 12 is 24, and 24 plus 0. This should be 24 here. I think I took 24 and that. I don't know what I did there. But the good news is there's no negatives on the bottom. We're done. Most time, like I said earlier, this says when you have 3 negatives on the bottom, that usually means 3 iterations. We're going to get through in just one. That's a miracle. Okay, so my max is $24 at x equals, y equals, z equals. Found an error mistake. I don't know why I put a 2 there. Okay, so my answers, okay, you got the x column, the y column, and the z column. So in the x column, that's not a 0 column, so, or a unit column, so that means x is automatically 0. The y column's okay, the 1 is here, so y is going to be 12. And the z column is not a unit column, so that's going to be 0 also. And you could write that as an ordered triple. 0, 12, and 0. I hope that makes sense. Okay, that takes care of section 4.2. So, have at it.